Hey, good day. Paul Sterling here. I am the author of Argue Less, Love More. And for over the last 25 years, I have been a communication and intimacy coach for couples. And so we're going to dive in today into one of my most favorite topics, but one of the most challenging topics also, which is how do you save a relationship? So if you're here, I'm guessing that you're here because your relationship is not going as planned. I'm going to move some stuff around. Um, and I'm not a technological wizard. I have to re-record. I did this show last week. This is the Courageous Love Show, and then the recording got screwed up. So I'm redoing it just because there were so many requests for it. All right. So, like I said, I'm guessing you are here because your relationship isn't going as planned and you're probably hurting, maybe even feeling hopeless, helpless in the face of this painful mess. And by the way, I'm dyslexic, so I read things backwards. This is always a wonderful challenge for me. I do it because it's an act of love. And all right, I'm also guessing you might be feeling skeptical because nothing you've tried so far has worked. In fact, a lot of my clients say that when they're in this cycle, most of the time, the harder they try to be heard and understood and valued, the worse things get. Um, and they still love each other, but are constant conflicts that are wearing you down. And you're probably asking yourself, should I stay or should I go? And you may even be, well, I'm guessing you're here because you're looking for answers. And I'm also guessing you're feeling cautiously optimistic at best because nothing you've tried so far has made a difference. Can you relate? Um, by the way, even if you're watching this on the replay, which most of you will be, go ahead and respond in the comments. Let me know, can you relate? Where are you calling in from, listening in from? And I want to welcome you to how to fix and save your marriage slash relationship, even if things feel pretty hopeless right now. So I also want to acknowledge you for being a stand in your relationship. You're, I'm guessing you're committed to creating a safe space for open, honest, compassionate communication. You're committed to healing the past and being present in and creating a whole new world of possibilities for the future, even if it seems hopeless now. I'm guessing you're also committed to having your beloved be your best friend, your trusted partner, and your passionate lover. Now, it might be really challenging to see this right now and go, this is what I want, but it may seem impossible. And lastly, you're committed to making your relationship, and I call it unreasonably remarkable, because it's really almost unreasonable to think that relationships succeed with the huge differences we have, the limited communication skills, the challenges we go through. It's almost unreasonable to think about what it takes to succeed. So, can I tell you why I'm so passionate about fixing and saving relationships and marriages? So just type in a yes there, you bet, whatever it is. So here we go. I got this. I was thinking the other day about how successful and how are we doing in the world of relationships. So I got these stats that what's a couple, well, over a year ago, I got the stats, but I had a new breakthrough just 2 days ago. So the stats are we have about 2 million weddings a year, average investment 30,000. That's a $60 billion a year that we invest in love. And every 30 to 36 seconds, someone gives up and says, I don't. You know, when you get married, you say, I do. And when you get divorced, you say, I don't. I'm done. I've had it. And the divorce rate is 876,000 to a million a year. So it's almost, and if we added together marriages plus significant relationships where you're committed, monogamous, you're in it, and the breakups that happen there, I would guess we would be lucky if we were at 50%. Now, the average cost of a divorce, wow, that's the same as the average cost of a marriage. Actually, sometimes it's even more, because divorce can equal 1/2 of everything you own. And the real damage is kids, family, self-esteem, lost hope and dreams, productivity, outlook on life, fear to try again. Now, I want you to think about this. This is a different way of looking at it. So some people can say 50% is horrible. I'm going to tell you 50% is fabulous, because so few people are trained in communication and conflict resolution and getting their needs met and dealing with difficult issues and forgiveness and healing and rebuilding trust. It's amazing to me that 50% of the marriages actually succeed. So here's my history, just a tiny bit of it. This is my dad and my mom. That's Robert. He's no longer with us. Diana, my mom's still going strong. They loved each other, but after 18 years, it was like no more. They quit. And it wasn't because of lack of love. It's because they didn't have the right tools. They still loved each other, but they ran into problems that were bigger than their skill set. And when I watched growing up how painful it was in the relationship, I said, there has got to be a better way to do this. And some of the things I learned from my dad, well, there's 3 things. My dad used to say, the best defense is a strong offense. So anytime he felt vulnerable, he would get what? Offensive. And what I learned from that is vulnerability equals danger. I learned how to defend myself by attacking the people I love, and how to withhold love and affection as a form of manipulation. The other thing I learned is my dad would say, do you want something to cry about? I'll give you something to cry about. And so the third thing I learned from my dad was that my feelings were the enemy, that it's best if I don't reveal my feelings. And this is me. This is me and my older brother. And actually, my older brother, Kevin, he didn't have the tools either, and he ended up committing suicide, which was part of what got me on this path of trying to understand human behavior. So I left my parents and I said, there's got to be a better way. And I got married. That's Corrine. That's actually my only marriage. And in my mind, I made a commitment. This time it will be different. And you know what? It wasn't, because I wasn't different. And this is engagement number 1, Kelly, and engagement number 2, Georgina, and Julianne, and Sequoia. And that was 4 engagements and 4 incredibly wonderful women. And I wasn't different. And I wanted to be. God, did I want to be different. It was heartbreaking. I'm still friends with most of them, and I miss them. And I didn't have the tools. So here's some of the turning points in my life. I want you to write down mentors and methods, and breakthroughs. So at age 21, my business partner and I went to Florida. Well, we had been in Alaska since I was 17 fishing, and we went to Florida, bought a 80-foot fishing boat. That's me. And while I was in Alaska, I bumped into this guy, Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And why that's important is Robert opened up my mind to the world of personal growth. I didn't know it was possible before. I wanted it, but didn't know it. And so he also introduced me to this guy here. So that's Tony Robbins, a much younger Tony Robbins, and that's a much younger me. I used to, first, I was part of his staff, his free staff that would come help. I would introduce him on stage. And then later, I was part of his paid staff. And then even later, he hired me to come in and teach his inner circle. So I knew my life had changed when Tony Robbins was the person introducing me. And why is Tony important? Because he is a master at PIPR, pattern identification, pattern interrupt, pattern replace. And most likely, if you're in a relationship where you're going, should I stay? Should I go? How do I turn my relationship around? Part of that is definitely going to be the work I learned from Tony. It's finding the patterns, identifying the patterns that are driving a wedge between you and your partner, interrupting those patterns, and then replacing the patterns. Now, after Tony, and these aren't always straight lines, so that was another huge breakthrough. I can look at my life before and after Robert Kiyosaki, before and after Tony. This guy here, that is Marshall Thurber. And Marshall transformed my life. And I'll just say one of the things that he taught me was about systems. And that's how I look at relationships. Because either you chase symptoms or you fix systems. And that transforms the way people look at it. And we transform the way people, the system they use for communication, because a lot of people communicate the old way, which is shame, blame, guilt game. That's what I learned growing up. Shame, blame, and guilt. And until you fix that system, it's hard to heal the relationship. So I learned a lot from Marshall, and he transformed my life. And then the next guy is somebody named Charles Muir. And Charles is known as the grandfather of Tantra. And I learned the world of sacred sexuality from Charles. And if you think about it, one of the forms of communication that we have in relationships is sex and intimacy. And I had never been taught how to touch a woman and please a woman in the world of intimacy. And so Charles and Caroline, his wife at the time, it was a huge eye-opener for me to be able to learn how to do that, the whole world of intimacy. And for a lot of people, they're stuck in a marriage where they really love each other and their love life sucks. And they don't even have the tools to be able to talk about it. And that's where this next person comes in. This is another Marshall. This is a guy named Marshall Rosenberg. Marshall Rosenberg was the creator of something called nonviolent communication. And I looks like my Wi-Fi is a little sketchy, but I'm going to keep on going. And I look at my life before and after Marshall, and it transformed, truly transformed. And what Marshall taught me is how to communicate and how to make friends with my feelings and needs and my partner's feelings and needs. So that, because in relationships, there's only one reason to be in a relationship is to get your needs met. But most people don't even know how to talk about their needs. And if they do, they have something called need shame. So they're probably one of the reasons you're on this call and your relationship is at the edge of falling apart is because somewhere along the way you stopped getting your needs met. So Marshall taught me how to communicate in a whole different way and make friends with my feelings and, most importantly, my needs. And for you to have a breakthrough, because that's what this is all about, is creating a breakthrough so you can get back in a relationship and maybe even make your relationship better than ever. This next gentleman is a guy named Bob Proctor. Bob is no longer with us, but Bob transformed my life. And I was lucky enough to call Bob and Linda, his wife, my friends, and got to spend a bit of time with him, even got to go up to Toronto and stay with them for a little bit. And what he taught me is, how do we communicate with ourselves? How do we communicate between our subconscious and our conscious mind? And how do you get what you want? How do you create breakthroughs in what's possible in your life? And I need to move ahead here. This is me and Byron Katie. Byron Katie wrote Loving What Is. And why I'm spending a little bit of time with each of these is, each of these people, each of these mentors taught me some of the methods that I use with clients today. And I really want to acknowledge where I got mentored. And each one was a breakthrough. And I'm going to back up one. Like with Marshall Rosenberg and NVC here, I was living in Canada at the time, and I flew all the way to Sweden and spent a month with him, and I spent $5,500. I had invested a lot of money in my business before, buying boats, doing all this stuff, but I had rarely invested. I don't think I'd ever invested that kind of money in myself before, and my relationship. And that was transformational. And then, like I was saying, Byron Katie, what she's great at is helping you break free from limiting beliefs, because most likely your ROS, your relationship operating system, is not user-friendly. It was created by a 7-year-old, is full of bugs and viruses, and it is literally sabotaging your relationship, and you don't even know it's there. So I went from being a guy who went through 1 divorce, 4 broken engagements, basically a relationship disaster, to someone who's closer to a master. I wrote a best-selling book, Argue Less, Love More. It was #1 in 5 different categories in Amazon, which boggled my mind. My video on intimacy for couples has been now seen 6.8 million times, almost 6.9 million times. And that's amazing. So I'm going to give you everything I got in this next, whatever it is, however many time we have together, about 40 more minutes or so. And for some of you, that's going to be enough. Some of you are going to be too much. And some of you are going to want more. You're going to want to know, how do I take this and incorporate this in my relationship? And how do you rebuild trust, bring back the intimacy? How do you have tools, methods, and mentorship to create tools for communication so that both of you feel heard, understood, and valued, so that you can meet conflict with compassion, courage, and curiosity? So one of the keys here is learning how to speak from your heart. And this is part of the core message. I'm going to get into it here and then some of the other videos I did, but just say this with me. When I speak from my heart, magic happens in my relationships. Now, I know it's not just that simple, but say that with me. When I speak from my heart, magic happens in my relationships. And now let's take a second and look at what I'm calling the gap. Where do you want to be 6 months from now? Just think about being able to speak from your heart, reconnect, rebuild trust, create intimacy that like you've never had before, the best sex life of your life. Heal the past, deal with those issues. What would your life be like 6 months from now doing that? And then what's your life like now? How is communication now? Is there like a gap between where you want to be and where you are now? I'm guessing there's a big gap, or you wouldn't be watching How Do You Save Your Relationship? I know for me, there's been big gaps, and sometimes I didn't get the tools in time. So do you want to know the secrets I use to help couples save their relationship? I'm guessing you're saying yes. Now, I'm going to give you a hint here. If you want to have better answers, and I'm guessing you are here for better answers, if you want to have better answers, you have to ask better what? Questions. So again, this is Tony Robbins. He looked so young there, and so did I. I actually had a head of hair at one point. What Tony says is successful people ask themselves what? Better questions. And as a result, they get better answers. So Tony's pretty wise and helps people transform and have breakthroughs all the time. So if he says that, I think that's a good idea. And then this is Bob Proctor again, and that's Linda. And I was talking to Bob about saving relationships, and he goes, "You're asking the wrong question." I'm thinking, what's wrong about that? Like, can this relationship be saved? He goes, that's the wrong question. He said, almost any relationship can be saved. A better question is this relationship worth saving? So I'm going to ask you that question right now. Is your relationship worth saving? And why? What is it about this person that's special? Or are you just worried about losing something? Is it like a cat chasing a string? Has the relationship ever been great? So I'm going to go through 5 questions. How many questions? 5 questions. Here we go. We're going to dive in and go through all of them. Got to make sure I follow along here. Okay. So first question is the big why. Is this relationship worth saving? And if so, why? If it's a yes, then great. Let's move ahead. If it's a no, then you don't even have to watch the rest of the video. But here's some other questions. Do they bring the best out in you? Do you bring the best out in them? Are you committed? Are they committed? You want to make sure that both of you are committed to the relationship. Because here's what happens in life. We're going along, and I call this the gratitude. Some people call it the honeymoon phase. And sometimes this lasts for days, weeks, months, 20 years, 30 years. The gratitude phase is where it's easy to win and hard to lose, and you feel grateful for having your partner. The granted phase is where you start to take them for granted, and it becomes easy to lose, hard to win, and eventually you end up at the point of no return. Some people have quit their relationship, but they haven't left it yet. So their relationship died years ago, they just haven't buried it yet. So here's the choice. Like most people that are here, they're going to make a turn. Hopefully they haven't hit the point of no return. They're going to take some time and energy and start working at it. And I'm going to tell you some stories about some couples here in a minute that did this. So when you're on the road to recovery, you can do the minimal amount, and it's never as good again as it was, or we can work together and you can make your relationship better than ever. So what are some of the things in life that happen? A critical one, your needs stop getting met. And when your needs stop getting met, you feel neglected, intimacy disappears, there's financial issues, affairs, jealousy, broken agreements. All these things erode your relationship. Past wounds. And if you don't know how to handle it, if one of the things I talk about is doing the dishes daily, if you don't do the dishes daily, the dishes pile up. If you don't do life daily, if you're not constantly, or at least frequently, in the healing, forgiveness, and rebuilding trust process, life will beat you down and destroy your relationship. And what ends up happening is you hope the next relationship will be better. So why I started with this is if you have a big enough why, like why to stay in this relationship, why to have a breakthrough, you'll find a way. If you have a big enough why, you'll find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse. So what I'd like to do is dive into some of the ways. We're going to dive into some of the ways right now. But before I do, I want to just give you, this is a little reassurance here. Like, Michael came to me and he said, these are from Michael and his wife are from San Diego. And he said, I came to Paul as a last ditch effort to save my relationship. I tried everything I could think of to get my relationship unstuck over many years, and nothing worked. Having tried marriage counseling unsuccessfully earlier in our relationship, we were both a bit skeptical. So how many of you are a bit skeptical, but wish it would work? So they were a bit skeptical, or a lot skeptical, about trying a coach, which is what I am. I'm a relationship coach. We figured if a psychologist couldn't help, then how could a relationship coach be a benefit? All I can say is that I'm glad we took the chance with Paul. It's making a huge difference for us. As a couple, we interact differently and have largely ridded ourselves of detrimental communication patterns. Now, remember, I said patterns. So there's communication patterns. This is what I talked about with Tony Robbins, identifying the patterns and interrupting the patterns and replacing them. So what did I do with them? I helped them identify their communication patterns, interrupt them, and replace them with helpful patterns rather than painful ones. We are much happier and more open with one another now and enjoy a new space that has opened up between us. Our thanks to Paul, as well as our recommendation. He's exceptionally good at what he does. Now, what I would say is I've been doing this for almost 25, maybe closer to 30 years. What I have is exceptional method. I have exceptional system where you can plug your communication in and transform it. What it is the way, or some very powerful methods. So the second question, so the first question is this relationship worth solving? Second question, is this problem solvable? Is this relationship savable? So is it worth saving? It can be worth saving, and it can be not savable because the problem is not solvable. So is this problem solvable? Has anyone solved it in the past? So some people say, if there's an affair, it's unsolvable. That's not true. It may be hard. It may be painful. It may take a lot of work. Do you have the right method? It is solvable. There are plenty of people that have gone through betrayals, affairs, jealousy, all sorts of broken agreements, and found a way to solve it. Part of it that I'll get into a tiny bit is the 3-part apology process, where you really learn about forgiveness, healing, and rebuilding trust. Do you know what's stopping you right now? If you know what's stopping you, there's a good chance we can work it out. And are you willing to learn how to communicate heart to heart? Because that's the way. There's a method there. Now, a lot of people I'm not going to spend too much time in it, but I want to call it the communication trap, because if you're wanting to save the relationship, there needs to be forgiveness, healing, and rebuilding trust. Now, the communication trap is you're damned if you talk about the issues, and you're damned if you don't. So here's what happens. We want forgiveness, healing, and rebuilding trust. We want to clear up the issues, rebuild safety and connection. And the way to do that is to talk about the misunderstandings, upsets, and conflicts. This upper one tends to be more of the female mindset. The male mindset is they're wanting to avoid making it worse. So they want forgiveness, healing, and rebuilding trust. And to do that, we have to avoid making it worse by avoiding triggering each other into reaction, because in reaction, there's only dominate or be dominated. And if you want to avoid triggering each other, you have to avoid talking about upsets, conflicts, and misunderstanding. Can you see where the trap is? For the female, we can't heal it if we don't talk about it. If the male mind is like, let's get over it. So we'll work through this so that you can have a breakthrough in this area. Because most relationship breakdowns start with a communication breakdown. And if you don't clear up that breakdown, it will destroy the relationship. So here's how we deal with it. 3 parts. I'm not going to get too much into it. I just want you to know there is a method, 3-part method. We start by clearing up the past, connecting, getting present, creating possibilities for the future. Because if you don't clear up the past, where is it? The past is in the present, and then there's no possibility for the future. So forgiveness, healing, and rebuilding trust, that's the first step. Now, you can save this and watch it later, but I just want you to see that behind it, clearing up the past, there is a whole methodology. Not only there's a methodology, we're looking at your mindset, your heart set, and your skill sets so that you can transform your relationship. And like I said, I want you to just see that there's methods here rather than having a deep dive into it. Learning the effective communication that brings them closer. I'd say it's like builds a bridge versus a communication that pushes them away and drives a wedge in the relationship. And when you're doing the wedge communication, the more you talk about it, the worse it gets. And all you end up doing is producing resistance, resentment, regret. Does this sound familiar? Can you relate to this? All right. The last part of this is I want you to know that there is basically a toolkit that we're going to get out, like your relationship tool belt. It's about compassionate communication, getting your needs met, resolving conflicts, healing wounds, rebuilding trust, creating intimacy, the 3 shades of it, emotional, physical, sexual intimacy, and dealing with your differences. And by the way, by the end of our time of working together, should we decide to work together, you're going to be making what I call daily deposits, because you have what's called the relationship bank account. And you're either making deposits or withdrawals. And in that bank account, if you make too many withdrawals, it doesn't matter whether you still love each other, the bank account gets closed. Divorce, separation, it's over. In fact, the most painful thing is when relationships, people still love each other, but the relationship falls apart. So I want to give you a quick story of Ian and Melodia. Ian and Melodia came to me, I believe, in 2015. And this is them, super smart, beautiful, capable Californian. She ran a very successful business, Melodia Designs, in and her work together. He surfs, and they really loved each other, but they were living together and they were working together, and it felt like communication felt like cats and dogs, and they didn't know what to do about it. And this course gave them the tools, language, and infrastructure they can use now. Basically, it gave them the method. How would you like the method? And it said, we now feel a breath of new possibility in our future and feel like a new level of intimacy and love is deeply fulfilling and exciting. And the reason I wanted to say to them, because some people go, how long does it last? Did it work? Well, we first worked together in 2015. In October 2018, this picture was taken. And this picture is in Arizona at an Arizona hot springs, and it's Melodia and Ian's wedding. And that's part of the wedding party. They rented this whole sort of like Burning Man campground hot springs for a wedding. It was a weekend wedding. It really was truly one of the sweetest weddings I've ever been to. And the only gift they gave all of the guests was a copy of my book, because it made such a big difference. And what Melodia later said is the reason they're married now is because of the tools that they have it enabled them to come together. And last October being their anniversary, I just saw them on Facebook. They shared some pictures and they're better than ever. So better than ever. How would you like to turn your relationship around from not being able to get along or fighting like cats and dogs to having a relationship where it's better than ever? So that's the how. And here's the who. Now, who's into it? Is it just you, just your partner? Is it both of you? Because one of the first things we do, well, one of the reasons it fails, relationship coaching, counseling, therapy fail, is if you don't agree on the problem, you won't agree on the solution. And what we're trying to do is figure out not who's the problem, but what's the problem. And we also want to know who's going to work on it. And WIIFM, WEIT, that's what's in it for me. And are you willing to do whatever it takes? So if your partner's clear what's in it for them and you're clear what's in it for you, you'll do whatever it takes. And if it was easy and comfortable, you would have already done it. But if you're willing to look at yourself and you're willing to be coachable, there's a possibility for it. And then can you see the patterns? Can you start doing, remember I said PR. Pattern identify, pattern interrupt, pattern replace. Can you see the painful patterns? Is it the way you communicate? It's the way you make demands. It's the way you push each other. And here's the really courageous part. Can you find your part? Can you see what you're doing to push your partner away? If you're not part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. And then lastly, do you have the courage it takes to really look inside and grow? Are you willing? And here's the thing. One of my friends is a pilot for 777s. And I asked him, how much fuel does it take to take off? It says 20 gallons a second in takeoff. And then 10 gallons a second in climbing. And then cruising 1 to 2 gallons. And then it gets less when you start to decline. Now, why this is important is because in the beginning of the relationship, you're putting in the 20 gallons a second. You're putting in the time, the energy, the investment in the relationship. And then we end up on cruise and then we slowly start declining. Well, if you want to save your relationship and it's headed down, it's headed for a crash, you're going to have to put in a lot. You're going to have to invest time, money, energy, get uncomfortable, lead the charge. Because once it's headed down, it's going to take a big thing to turn it around. You could just cruise here. You cannot cruise here or you're going to hit the PONR. It's just making sense. All right. And why I'm tying in here, we have 3 zones: the comfort zone, which is where most of our patterns are, the growth zone. And to turn your relationship around, you're going to have to be in the growth zone. And the growth zone is somewhere between the comfort zone, which is your old patterns, and the terror zone. And now, how do you know you're in the growth zone? You're saying things like, oh, that won't work for me. I can't do that. What you're looking for is how you take a breakdown and turn it into a breakthrough. And just before you have a breakthrough, you're going to want to quit. That sounds too hard. That's embarrassing. I'm not smart enough. I've already tried that. It's all of that stuff can tell you you're almost certainly in the right place. You just need to have the right method. So, question number 4. Number 1 was why, the what, how, when. Is this a priority? If it's not a priority, it's not going to happen. If you don't put aside time and energy, it's not going to happen by itself. Cavities don't get filled by it themselves. If you don't put it on your calendar, and if you're not ready to have a breakthrough and get out of your comfort zone now, it's not going to happen. So, and I said this earlier, if you don't agree on the problem, you won't agree on the solution. And if you don't agree how big the problem is, you won't agree on the timetable. And a lot of times, for men, we have a higher tolerance to being in a crummy relationship, just statistically, than women do. Women have a higher tolerance for pain, childbirth, all of this other stuff. But typically the women go, we need to change. This has become intolerable. And I've had men come to me, literally, one guy came and he said, like, I came home and she had a moving truck there and it cleaned out the house. All it was left was a kitchen table and a note. And he says, is it too late? I said, yeah, probably. So on my Subaru, there's a warning light for my tires, and when the warning light goes off, it's pay attention. It's important. You need to take action now. Is there a warning light that's gone off in your relationship? Now, if you look at the tire, you could probably drive on it for a little bit, but you're going to start doing damage. This tire, it is urgent. It's basically what you would call a flat tire. You need to take action now. And if you don't take action, what's going to happen? This is going to happen. You're going to destroy the tire. PONR, too late. Now, I'm going to tell you one other quick story, and then we're going to start wrapping this up. But one client came to me, and they were in a big upset. Should I stay? Should I go? And then he had moved. They didn't work with me right away. They delayed, and then he moved out. And he actually moved onto another continent with another woman. He was gone. And she said, is there anything we can do? And I said, well, there's one thing we can do. We can work with you, and you can transform the way you communicate. Now, people say, how many people does it take to create a change? Well, they typically say 2 people, but no, think about it. If you're dancing cheek to cheek and one person changes, it changes the dance. So I worked with her, taught her communication skills, transformed the way she communicated. He came back over Christmas, had been away for months, came back over Christmas, and and he was just coming back to pick up his stuff and be gone forever. And their communication was so different, so transformed, a totally new method of communication that he never left. And that was probably 8 years ago. And I texted him about a week ago. So what I'm saying, and this is another metaphor here, if an acorn hits the roof of your house, is it a big deal? No. If an oak tree hits the roof of your house, it's a big deal. A lot of you have waited and not dealt with the acorns. You know, there's a book that says, don't sweat the small stuff. I say, wrong, wrong, wrong. Sweat the small stuff, deal with the acorns before they become oak trees. And I'll give you some methods to be able to deal with the acorns. So the last question here is the who. Who's going to do this? And do you want help? And I highly, highly, highly recommend getting help. Whether it's me or somebody else, find somebody who's really trained at it. Because right now, if you look at it, it's you against them. And the more you talk, often the worse it gets. You need someone who can help you translate. And one of the things Tony taught me, he talks about this, is with a mentor, you can turn decades into days. Now, the big question here is, are you coachable? And do you want to have a conversation to see what's possible, to see what's going on now so that you can turn decades into days? Are you willing to risk your relationship through trial and error? Or do you want to follow a proven path? Like I did with my mentors. I've created a proven path. And here's another one that somebody said. This couple came to me. I did a 1-hour workshop. They came to it, and then he wanted to do work, and then he didn't, and he did. did and it didn't. And it was like 3 or 4 months of going back and forth before he finally decided he wanted to do it. And he regretted wasting all that time later. But he said, this is Jesse in July from Essex Junction. After many attempts at couples work with other individuals, working with Paul has finally helped my partner and I break through. And notice that's a common theme. People have had breakthroughs. What do you want? You want a breakthrough. And had a breakthrough to a new place of understanding and appreciation for one another. Now, I'm going to go a little bit more into it. And if you could type in the comments which one of these you want for your relationship. Now, I did an interview with them a year or so after working with them and said, how are things going? And what did you get from working together? And what she said, she got back her feminine power and went from feeling like he had all the power and final say to understanding he wanted to be her hero and make her happy. How many of you want that with your partner? So if that's what you want, put the A in there. Then she could use the can you hear me now process. So that's a process of communication. That's the method where you learn how to hear, understand, and value your partner and really enter their world so that they feel heard. It doesn't matter whether you hear them, it matters that they feel heard, understood, and valued. And then she was able to have more patience, confidence, and compassion with her partner. She was also able to discover which of the 10 core needs were beneath most of her upsets. If you're upset with your partner right now, it's one or more of these needs are not getting met. Would it be good to know what they are and how to name, negotiate, notice, name, and negotiate your needs? She stopped taking his masculinity personally and started understanding the differences between the sex, and she got clear on the power of her words. Now, here's what he got. And type in A, B, C, whichever one you want there. He got to not take himself so seriously and started having much more fun in the relationship. He started understanding the differences also in a way that was powering for both and enabled them to create more polarity in the relationship. And with the polarity became more passion. And he saw sex as a great indicator of how they were, sort of the canary in the coal mine. He loved that he was able to really enter her world so that she felt heard, understood, and valued, and he felt like a hero. How many of you guys want to feel like a hero? And by the way, this works in straight relationships, gay relationships. It doesn't matter. I have clients in both worlds. It really, your partner wants to be your hero and make a difference for you. He stopped worrying about what he said. This is so critical. And became more interested in what she heard. This is a game changer in relationship. And it was a huge breakthrough for them. He loved that they both were aware of the impact of using bad, stupid, wrong. Now, growing up, bad, stupid, wrong, that was part of our dinner time language. We grew up in a very sarcastic community, a sarcastic family, rather. And like I said, my dad's expression was the best defense was a strong offense. The problem is you don't want to be offensive with your partner. Remember what I said, when I speak from my heart, magic happens in my relationship. So it's decision time. What's your next step? Now, there's 3 basic next steps. Here's the one I did for many times. That's like called 1 divorce, 4 broken engagement. Do nothing. Hope and pray, which is a form of self-sabotage. I could do it myself. So just write in there, which one do you want to do? Do you want to do nothing? Do you want to do it yourself? Or do you want to do it with a mentor? And for years, I was going to do it myself. I'm an ex-commercial fisherman from Alaska. This is John Wayne. I'm going to figure that shit out. I'm going to be the rough and tumble guy. And what I finally learned is do it with a mentor. And I could turn decades into days, learn and grow and have the best relationships of my life. So here you go. Remember at the beginning, I said, some of you are going to want to know more. Here's how you can learn more and actually see if working together is a good idea. So what you're going to do is go to my schedule, find a time, and we'll spend 45 minutes together. This is a complimentary, confidential conversation. We'll spend about 45 minutes together. There's a safe space, and we're going to talk about 3 things. Number 1, what's possible? What are your real dreams for your relationship? What's happening now? So there's your dreams, and it might be a disaster. It might just be mediocre. But if you're at the should I stay or should I go, things are not going well. And then we'll look at what are the hidden roadblocks. What are the problems that if we solve these few problems will make the biggest difference? So you go to arguelesslovemore.com/time. And when you do that, if there's time left over, because I'm doing this for the next 2 weeks, I'm just going to do 3 people. So 3 couples. So if you can find a time, what you'll do is you'll click on the date. It will show you the times available. You pick a time, fill out the information. There will be a survey there. That's step 1. Step 1 is to pick a time. Step 2 is I'm going to give you a more in-depth survey. And what happens is I get to see what's going on in your relationship. So like when it comes to trust, this is rarely 50% of the time, mostly. So like my partner got my back. This one's good, mostly, but the partner feels like only rarely. So see, there's this big ass gap. One partner says most of the time, the other one says rarely. So, and here you look at this one, needs getting met. Do you think this relationship's going to survive like this? We talk about our needs. Rarely. My partner meets mine. Rarely. I understand and meet theirs. Rarely. What are the chances of that relationship working if things don't get changed? So this survey helps me understand where you are now and whether you get a complimentary conversation with me or not, you can still go take the survey. And the last thing I'll send you to is the arguelesslovemore.net. Now, some of these are .com and some are .net, so you got to pay attention to that. About page. And the About page, there's a video there. It's about 15 minutes long, and it will probably show you where about 60% of the problems are coming from in your relationship. So do that. Go schedule yourself a time, and let's talk soon. I really appreciate it. And if you got a lot out of this, feel welcome to share this video with friends and family, people that need this. So this has been Paul Sterling from Argue Less, Love More. Have a great day. I will see you later. Thank you for your time and attention and your desire to have a breakthrough in your relationship.